So good evening, everybody, and welcome to this exciting action-packed webinar today. I'm really excited and looking forward for this webinar. Before we begin, let me introduce our speaker today, who's Beth Buelow from US. Beth is a PCC coach, and she has been committed to supporting professionals and entrepreneurs for the past 12 years. Apart from being a PCC coach, she is also a certified mentor coach and has been very active in the ICF at both local as well as national level. Beth has been a member of ICF Washington State, and currently she serves as a president for 2021 on the board of directors for ICF Michigan. Beth runs her own podcast, which is How Can I Say This? And this runs in more than 85 countries. She's also an author of book, The Introvert Entrepreneur. Wonderful. And Beth has been a presenter at ICF Converge Conference, and she loves topics like ethics and competencies, ICF competencies, coaching competencies. These are very, very close to her heart. She believes agreement is the most crucial element in a coaching conversation, and that is what she brings to us today. Before I hand over to Beth, I would also like to introduce you Opal. Opal is a member of CTD family based out of Sri Lanka, and he is on his journey to getting ACC credentials. Opal has been brave enough to volunteer for becoming a coachee today. So thank you so much, Opal, for doing that. And welcome, Beth. Welcome to the CTD webinar, and thank you for doing this for us today. I will go off video, and maybe I'll hand over the stage to both of you. And I'll come back once the coaching session is over. Yeah, so welcome, Beth, and over to you.
All right. Thank you so much. And it looks like Muglerasi. I'm probably not saying that correctly. Thank you. He says, I love the Mughal says, I love the introvert entrepreneur. So it's lovely to know that. I always appreciate hearing when that has been meaningful to someone. So thank you. And I'm going to share my screen and jump right in because we've got a lot to cover. And I'm excited to do my session with Opal and then to see what discussion comes out of it. So I am going to share my screen. And Opal, can you give me a thumbs up that you can see that? And it looks good. All right, excellent. So we're going to be talking about, as Ashwari said, that the agreement is the most critical piece of a coaching session. And it's the part that I often hear coaches struggle with. They both say they struggle with it, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and they end up struggling with it actually in the session. So there's a story that we tell ourselves about the agreement that I'm hoping we can move through as we unpack this evening. The first thing I'd love to hear from you all, and if you wouldn't mind sharing in the chat, what is your biggest challenge with establishing a session agreement? And feel free to, type out what it is on this list or just put the number. The first one is narrowing down a focus when the client brings lots of topics. So they say, I have 10 things on my mind. How do we know where to focus? Knowing what to do when a client says, I don't know, when we ask what they want to focus on. Getting clarity around the desired session outcomes. Knowing when the agreement setting ends and the coaching begins. Interrupting or focusing a talkative client. Or is there something else that's not on this list that you find challenging? So I'm just going to pause for a moment, and please take a moment to share in the chat. What is your biggest challenge? And I'm going to be taking a look. I see narrowing down. 1 and 2, 5. So interrupting, time to get the agreement in the session. Knowing what to do when they say, I don't know. Clarity. Interrupting talkative, 1 and 2, 5. I see lots of 1s and 5s. Let's see, 1 and 3, 4, 5. So I feel like I hit the mark with naming what some of these challenges are. And I hope as you're seeing this and seeing how many of us share these challenges, that this tells us that you're not alone. We're, the challenges that we're feeling with this, the difficulty, it's something that we all share. After the coaching begins, the client wants to go back to agreement. Deepak, I'd be curious if you could type just a little bit about what that maybe sounds like. Narrowing down and interrupting. I'm just sort of picking out a few of these here. Prioritizing the right ones. A quick win. Interesting. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for weighing in. And yeah, like I said, I hope that this is showing that we're not alone and that we have these common challenges. And before I move into the session with Opal, I'm going to give you some thoughts on each one of these challenges. And one thing I've learned is that coaches often like not a script, but give me a few words. How can this goes to my podcast? How can I say this? And so, what are some ways that we can get some clarity with our clients in this agreement setting portion of the call, while taking into account some of these challenges? Ayan says, assessing the personality profile of the client. And that gets to the big A agreement, which I think we'll be talking about in just a few minutes. So thank you, everyone, for weighing in. And my apologies in advance if I mispronounce anyone's name. I'm very sensitive to that because my last name is often mispronounced. And Ashwara did it perfectly. And so I want to be respectful, but I also ask for your forgiveness if I mispronounce. We are, as you can imagine, we are focusing on this particular core competency, number 3 in the new model, establishes and maintains agreements. And I just wanted us to get grounded in it before we keep going. This means that we're partnering with the client and relevant stakeholders. So it's not just the client, but sometimes if you're coaching within an organization, whether you're an internal or external coach, there are other people who have a vested interest in how the coaching goes. And so our agreements at the beginning are also with them. So we partner with the client and the relevant stakeholders to create clear agreements about the coaching relationship, process, plans, and goals. And I call that the big A agreement. That's the partnership agreement that we're forming that serves as the foundation for everything that follows. And then the second part of this is establishes agreements for the overall coaching engagement, as well as those for each coaching session. And that's where I talk about the little A agreement that we do from session to session. So we have this arc of the big A agreement of how we're being together in the partnership. And then we have the little A agreement that we're forming with each session. So we're going to be talking about both of those. And there are 3 things I want you to consider when you're thinking about establishing an agreement that I hope are helpful. And first is that establishing and maintaining agreements, remember, this is the foundation. This is the absolute essential piece. And sometimes it can be tempting to just kind of let it go and go with the flow. Like the client is kind of on a roll, so I'm just going to let them talk. And we have to resist that urge, because without that clear foundation, it's like we're trying to find our way in a new place without a map. It's like we're blindfolded a bit. And there's a saying, the baseball player Yogi Berra, I think he says something like, if you don't know where you're going, you will get there. And so it's, if you don't know where you're going, you will get there. I'm not saying it exactly right, but I'm guessing you get my drift with that it is, I think actually it's, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up somewhere. And we don't want to end up somewhere. We want to end up where the client is wanting to go. So to take our time with it. And that is really the second point of this, which is agreement setting is the coaching. If we have 30 minutes with someone, we might spend 20 of that. We might spend 20 of that getting the agreement. And sometimes, and this goes back to that point I made a moment ago, about like, where does the agreement end and the coaching begin? Well, the coaching is beginning the moment we begin the conversation, and it extends through the agreement setting. And it's where we can really unearth the why behind the what of what the client is bringing. And it's part of how we can start to look at what is that person's relationship to this issue, whether it's a challenge or an opportunity that they want to discuss. We can unpack a little bit, like, what's their relationship to it, and get past the topic itself. So to really have a lot of patience with it. It's remember that the agreement setting is part of the coaching, not a lead-in to the coaching. And another way, and this is so important that I want to drive it home with one more thought, which is, this is a quote that's sometimes misattributed to Abraham Lincoln. And actually it's a woodsman, someone who's a forester. And he says, was once asked, what do you do if you just had 5 minutes to chop down a tree? He answered, I would spend the first 2.5 minutes sharpening my axe. In the coaching session, if we have 5 minutes to, quote unquote, chop down that tree, to make progress towards what they want to focus on, we spend the first 2.5 minutes figuring out what is it that we are focusing on. We are sharpening that agreement. We are getting clarity on what we're going to be focusing on. So I almost feel like we can't emphasize this enough, to slow down through this process. And then the success of that big A agreement, how well we've set that up in the beginning, leads to the little A agreement. It leads to success in that area. And this is, what am I going to say? This is where we have to remember that we spend a lot of time learning how to be coaches, but clients don't necessarily learn how to be clients. And so there's a certain responsibility that we have to set them up for success. And here I just want to bring in the pieces of the core competency. There are 11 points that ICF offers us about establishing and maintaining the agreement. And these are the pieces that have to do with the big A agreement. And I'm not going to read them all out loud, but I just want to emphasize that we're talking about what coaching is or isn't. We're describing the process. And it's interesting, this is where I feel like sometimes we forget and we make assumptions about what the client will know about the process. And even if they've been coached before, whoever coached them before they didn't do it the same way we do it. And so we have to remember that just because they, say, oh, I've had a coach before, that they know how to be client with us and that we're going to know how to be coach with them. So we also talk about what's appropriate and not appropriate, what is and isn't offered, and the responsibilities. And again, I also think about swapping out that word responsibilities with expectations. What are the mutual expectations that we have of one another? And then, of course, we talk about the specific parameters, the guidelines like logistics and fees and confidentiality, et cetera. And then we form a plan and we have our goals and we talk about, whether or not we're compatible. So all of that is happening in that big A agreement. And like I said, we can't assume our client knows how to be a successful client. It's part of our job to share, here's how to set yourself up for success. Here's what I, as a coach, have experienced with other clients that have brought them results. And in that spirit, we have that discussion about how a client can prepare for a session. We suggest to them, for instance, set aside time before the session for reflection and learning. Like I sometimes use a focus form that they can fill out online that asks them, what have you learned since we last spoke? How did you do with what you wanted to be accountable for? What do you want to focus on for our session? What would be good to come away with? This at least gets them thinking in advance. I don't skip over those questions when we actually have our conversation, because even if they filled out the form an hour before our session, it might change. But at least they have set aside that time to mentally prepare themselves for the call. I often also talk about it's okay to come to the session not knowing what you want to talk about, because it's part of my job to help figure out, to work with you to figure that out. Come anyway, don't cancel, because there's always something to talk about, but to normalize that and say, this will happen and it's okay, to be on time and remove distractions. Encourage them to take notes on their own, come to the session with a pen or paper or your tablet or, a note-taking app or whatever it is. But that again is about putting the expectation on them that they are responsible for that piece of the session. To be ready for the opening questions, to know kind of what you're going to ask. The rhythm of a session from beginning to end. How does it usually flow? What can you tell them about that so they know what to expect? Help them understand the difference between coaching the person and coaching the problem. That, yes, you hope to get to that problem-solving piece, but in the meantime, you're going to be focusing on their relationship to that problem. I think if we're not explicit about that and talk a little bit about what that means, it can cause frustration. And they will say, this isn't what I expected. I wanted to walk away with a plan or answers or strategies. And it's like, yes, we will establish those. And first, we have to go through this other stage. We have to go through this looking at who you are. And then there's also permission. I call this permission to speak freely. I think we hear this expression. I'm thinking it's like a military thing when somebody of a lower rank is talking to someone who is their superior, and they'll say permission to speak freely. I think we as coaches, we often talk about, asking permission of the client or seeking permission if we want to switch gears and offer feedback or share something that is a personal experience. When we're making that big A agreement, we can also say, one of the challenges that clients often have or that I experience as a coach is you might be sharing something and I have a question and I'm not sure how to interrupt you. What would work for you? I just want to talk about that. Is it okay if I just jump in? Is it better if I let you, process for a while? So to prepare them for the idea that you're going to interrupt, and it's not about being rude. It's about trying to make sure that you are being in service to what they need. So that's a lot of stuff right there. But, to help them learn how to be a client, be explicit about what feedback loops you're going to use, and to know how it's going for everyone, to talk about what's working and what's not. What do you want more of? What do you want less of? So to make sure that you're clear that we can always talk about this. At any point, you can give me that information and we can have an open conversation about it. Explore what each of you needs to know about one another's identity or context, how you process and what your communication style is. We talked about, she noted that I'm an introvert and I work with introverts. And so talking about that is a really important piece of things. And it helps me to know what that client might need and what might work best for them in the session. Acknowledge those common coaching challenges and how to move through them, such as having trouble focusing on a topic or getting lost in a story or details. Talk about that. So that little A agreement then is, I think of these particular components. You have a clearing and maybe asking about some wins. You ask, what would you like to focus on? What outcome would you like to have by the end of our time together? This is a question that often gets dropped. What's important about this topic for you right now? What's important right now? And then starting point, where would you like to begin? Very simple. And this is where I invite you to think about, like, when we say, oh, setting the agreement is so hard. What if it was easy? What if we told ourselves it's easy? It's a conversation. And these are, these components that we have. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause here because I want to get into the session with Opal. And then assuming we have time at the end, I want to come back to those points at the beginning that were challenges and see where we're at. So I'm going to stop my share. And I want to kind of set up, Upal and I have not had a conversation before. I don't know what he's going to bring. And I invite everyone just to listen. We're going to talk for about, I think we probably have about 15-ish minutes. So a very focused time together. Okay. And we'll just see where we get. Does that sound fair, Upal?
Definitely, yes.
Okay, good. And so I invite everyone to listen, especially about how we're establishing the agreement. And I'm not promising that I will do it perfectly. This is the joy and the experimentation of life coaching, right? So let's see what we learn together. And so I invite everyone to think about two things. What do you notice about how we are interacting with one another? And what did you learn from observing us? Okay, so what did you notice and what did you learn? So with that, I'm going to be fully present just with Upal. So Upal, how are you this evening?
I'm great. We just had a session from Rajat that has been a wonderful session, thought-provoking and, very interesting. And again, listening to you, me being trying to become a better coach every day, now I feel, how important is the agreement. So
yeah,
it's great to have being in this session.
Yeah, thank you for volunteering. And it sounds like lots of learning is already happening.
Definitely, yes.
Oh, I appreciate that. Well, what would anything to clear before we jump in? Anything to be fully present that would be useful to share?
Not really. I'm perfectly okay with, I'm quite free with you. So I'm perfectly okay to discuss anything with you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Well, what would be useful for us to focus on for you today?
Yeah, there's this particular concern that I would like to talk up with you. Basically, I am thinking about going for a PhD program.
Mm-hmm.
Been thinking about, this is something that I should have done, 10 years ago. I had the opportunity, but there I missed it. Now, again, I have that opportunity now. And whilst having that opportunity, I'm supposed to send that application at least by next week. And then now this year I started this coaching journey, which I'm very passionate about. I love it, right? So I'm kind of in a bit of a fence situation, whether to go for the PhD or completely forget about the PhD, and I will only concentrate on my coaching journey. This is something I would like to talk with you, whereas, if possible, have more clarity towards, how should I make this decision, or else if I can, really, talk about how to arrive at a decision, that would be great. But, because of the limited time, I don't mind even having more clarity on that.
Okay, thank you. So I hear that you feel like you're at something of a crossroads and a decision point of applying for this PhD. And am I hearing this right? Applying for the PhD or going full in on coaching? I don't know that how would you define what the bottom line question is?
Yes, yeah. Let me further explain it. I'll be anyway going through with my coaching journey. Anyway, it is going to happen. So that is number one. So my only concern is, whilst I'm doing that, should I start this this PhD program as well? In the back of my mind, I feel like, if I manage my time, I'll be able to do that as well. But only thing, I always have been asking the question, am I so passionate about doing it, or just I wanted to get this doctor thing in front of my name, I'm going to do it, right? So I've been but with regard to coaching, I'm so love doing it. I really love doing that. I know the service that I'm doing to the others. That's why I wanted to have it. But always this, but by next week, I need to decide, I need to send the application or forget about it.
Okay. What's different than 10 years ago? You said this has been on your mind for a long time.
I was just after my MSc program in 2010 and 11. And then my friend is Jayanta Devasiri. He said, okay, let's go move for the PhD program as well. So I said, no, I have a lot of work. I'm very busy with my office work. I won't be able to do that. So he went into the program and he got the PhD after 5 years. And then now today he's a professor. Now he's pushing me. I'm going to help you. I'll be your supervisor. I'm going to help you. Do it. Now I'm there for you. So you do it. I will help you. Right. So he's keep on pushing me every day. He calls and tell me, do it. Now, I can't get away from him. He has been kind of telling me, even 10 years ago you didn't do it. Had you done it at that time, by now you would have had this title and all that. You are utilizing it. He's always going, through this. But there again, I'm really wondering what is important for me. Or is it, continue with something that I'm very passionate about, which I really love, or, do this, get into this PhD also. Beth, you don't know, actually, I'm a CEO of a finance company.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's a finance PhD.
Okay.
I have another 10 years in my career as well. So,
Mm-hmm.
and then even after that, I can go in towards for consultancy as well with regard to finance consultancy. Now, if I have that path as well, though I have shifted my, a little bit because of my liking towards this, that is also there. So
Mm-hmm.
for that, it will be really helpful if I have this PhD that is also there. So that's why, and the particular research area that I'm planning to get into is again it's IFRS 9 provisioning. That is very important topic for the Sri Lankan finance industry as well. If I get into that research topic and if I pursue that, if I improve on that area, that will be a kind of a service for the industry as well. That is also a fact. Having all these things, again, I'm still asking the question, what is important for me?
Yes.
So,
what do you know about what's important to you?
It has to be something that I really enjoy doing. Where whenever I am in a coaching session, I'm at peace. I have peace within me, and whenever they come into a realization, it's I'm so happy about it, and I want to continue to do that. I have my finance profession from one side. I can continue with that even without the PhD, right? That the PhD will only be something additional, and so only thing is, but what I can say, if in between, the coaching and the PhD. Now, coaching is something in a 1 to 10 scale. It's definitely 10 for me. But now this PhD is, somewhere around 6 or 7.
Okay.
Right? If I put into a scale. I'm still asking the question from me. Again, that particular question comes to me. Why can't you do both? Why can't you do both? Why not you do both?
So what comes up when you think about doing both?
Yeah, I feel I can do both, but then I'm asking, okay, right, this is finance, again figures, that is something that we have been doing for last 27 years. Now, do you want to live with the figures again? for the PhD program is for 3 years. So I'll be doing various research papers, publish, and then analyze figures and all that, which I've been doing for last 27 years. Bit boring actually. Tell you frankly, boring, right?
It's boring.
So yeah,
Which is kind of, if I can offer, that's like, I'm wondering the between boring and passion. What's the yeah, like, as you, if I could reflect back, as you were talking about the PhD process, you used words like helpful, important, service. And when you were talking about coaching, you had passion, energy and peace and enjoy and all of that. And so, and the PhD a 6 or a 7, whereas coaching is a 10. How will, well, let me pause there as I share that back to you. What are you noticing about your energy as you're talking about this?
I really love doing coaching, but the thing is, it always get into my mind, yes, you are not going to lose your coaching. You are going to continue with your coaching, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's no necessity for you to do the coaching as a profession at the moment. You have your job, right? So you anyway did learn coaching for you to learn coaching and do it as a service. That was my purpose actually. So you can continue with coaching. So are you going to lose coaching? No. So the coaching is there. So you can continue to learn, continue to coach whenever possible. And why not do the PhD also? This is the problem. Couldn't decide actually. So far, I couldn't decide on this. I'm really wondering if there's a way to push this down, that 7, to push it to somewhere around 2 or 3. Then I can forget about it. Right. The problem is my friend every day he calls me and say, so I'm going to help you. Right. So what is the big deal? So the research, the whatever, I'm there for you, and I'm your supervisor. What's the big deal that you just enroll yourself and go through the program?
Yeah.
Then I'm wondering, okay, what is the problem I'm having?
Well, can I want to jump in? Yeah, because we're coming back to your friend who is persistent with nudging you. And you ask yourself the question that I think needs to come up again, which is like, well, let me reframe it. Like, who wants this? Your friend or you?
Yeah, I definitely bet I want it now.
Okay.
I want it, right? So I want it. There again, the concern is, what do I really want? Is it peace and happy within me, whereas I move towards the latter part of my life, or again, it's coming to me. All right, if you are going to go through this PhD program, definitely though your friend says you will have some work, right? You'll have some work. Without having work, you can't do it, right? So, yeah, when you ask that particular question, who wants it? It's really enlightened me. Of course, how much he tells, it's me ultimately, right? So, I think I need to have a kind of real hard thinking about, okay, do I want to do it? Do I want to do it? I think that is where I think I really want to focus on now itself, which you really helped me. Do I want it? Yes, I also want it to a certain extent. I can't completely get away with that. I think this is something that I need to have further reflection, further thinking, and then figure out say, anyway, by next Friday, I'm done. So I think you really, enlightened me with regard to that particular question. You asked who want it. Yeah. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so I think on that particular line, I can uh, further uh, have a self-reflection where I really need to work on me. What do I really want? What do I really want? What do I really want? I think that is something that I need to really think further. And then I think by next Friday, when I further think about it, should be able to arrive at a decision and
Mm-hmm.
definitely let you. You are the first person to know that I have come up with a decision.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I ask you, what if you had to make a decision this Friday? What would you do?
Uh, I of course can't tell you. So far I couldn't really figure it out. I think
Okay.
I maybe I need some more time really to figure it out. But I really thankful to you. You really open my mind with regard to one particular thing. Okay, by all this time I've been thinking, he's there to help me. But again, I didn't really ask. I've been asking, but that particular thing really hit me. So I
Mm.
really need to focus on myself, what I really want. And
Yeah.
it's not only what I really want, but I need to further ask uh, how would I be more happy, right? So I mean, I think that is the question that I need to ask. This is the time that I have worked so hard for last 27 years. This is the time for me to enjoy as well my life. So
Yeah. Yeah.
going through the job is nothing for me now. But and doing coaching is again my hobby, right? So now so I have coaching journey apart from my office. Why do I need to get into another finance thing as well, right? Another
Mhm.
learning experience, right? So I think that's the line that I need to really think on. How would I be more happier? So
Yeah.
so then I think I will be able to find the the solution or the answers within me.
Yeah. 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 Thank you. Um, yeah, just that by asking that question, like, what if you had to do it now? And the fact that it's not bubbling up um, as a snap decision shows that you are asking yourself those deeper questions, and that those are really important to you to get clear about as you go into next week.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what do you feel like is what is your takeaway from this conversation that's most important to you?
I think now I'm more focused towards what I really want.
Mhm.
Earlier, I tell you frankly, I had this particular conversation with some of my peer coaches as well, right?
Mhm.
So then, what really happened was, end of the conversation, we discussed and we arrived at a decision. Okay, I'll send the application for the PhD program, and later, before they start the program, I will decide on what to do or not. That was the kind of conclusion. But uh, here, I think it really opened up to me. It's not so. I'm not going to now send the application as well now, right? Until I have really thought about it and finalize the decision. Right. So I think I'm ever thankful to you for supporting me to come into that state of mind.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you for being so authentic and being willing to share. And I can tell you're a very thoughtful and intentional person. And that as you do this reflection, you will come to the right place for yourself,
Thank you
for you.
so really
Yeah,
appreciate it. That's a great compliment. Thank you so much.
you're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. So I am wondering, in the time we have left, to hear from some folks. And Ashwara, how would you like to do it, in the chat, or I would just love to hear some noticings and reflections on what folks observed.
First of all, thank you so much. It was a wonderful session. And I think, majority of the points that you highlighted in the beginning, those 5 points, there are a couple of points which we're getting, which we could see happening here in this session. Mm-hmm. And thank you so much, Opal, for being so open and for being so brave and vulnerable to everybody around. I had disabled the chat in between because it was distracted during the conversation. I have enabled it again. So feel free to write your questions in the chat or in the Q&A session, or feel free to raise your hand and I will unmute you guys, whosoever raises the hand. So feel free to do that. And so let's see what are the questions there right now. How about some time on the resources that the coachee see as supporting him in the process of reflection or taking a decision?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you for bringing that up, Karen, because often we will, we focus on what's going to get in your way. And I didn't get into like what's going to get in your way and what's going to support you. But so often we talk about like, what are the barriers? And we forget to talk about what's going to support you, what will move you forward in making this decision. And so I really appreciate you bringing up that piece, because that's another way of supporting them and making this, furthering the agreement with the client.
All
and
right.
who wants this? Yeah,
thank you so much, Beth. And there's a question from Nilafar. When you ask a question, anything needs clearing, how would you proceed if the client said yes?
I would say this is something that you talk about in that big A agreement setting. And you could say, I will often start a session by asking, is there anything you need to clear? And I give examples like, for instance, it might be, my mother is sick and I'm a little worried about her. And so that's on my mind. And it helps just to name it and set it aside so I can be fully present. Or it could be like I was a few days ago, I'm waiting on a package that I have to sign for, and I don't know when it's going to come. And so my apologies in advance if I need to pause and go do that. And so if they say yes, I say, so what would be useful to clear so that you can be here? And if you've set up that portion of the call in the big A agreement to say, it's only it's like a 30-second conversation. Sometimes that clearing might lead to, this is what I want to focus on. And then it leads into the session. So sometimes asking that clearing question does actually lead to what they want to talk about. The invitation or the challenge is to not get hooked into whatever that is, because they might say, I have a challenging conversation coming up with my boss and it's on my mind. And I've heard a lot of coaches say, well, is that what you would like to talk about? And I would say, let the client say that. And you can ask that, if they're unclear, later, but don't assume that whatever it is they're clearing is what they want to focus on. So if they say yes, create some space for it, and then make it clear that you're shifting and say, okay, thank you for, sharing. And I'm glad that we can be here now. And what would you like to focus on?
Thank you so much. Let's see. So people are actually commenting on the question of whose need is it, or who wants it, has landed wonderfully on Opal. Who wants us kind of thing? Okay. Is there any question that I can see? Okay, Beth, please share your thoughts about the ICF focus on in this session in the UCC.
Okay, in the UCC.
Coaching competencies, I believe. Or CC
okay, the core competencies.
Yep.
Yeah.
In this session, when they say, well, so your thoughts on the ICF focus on this in this session?
In this session, I think that I do think that it's two-way. There are two things that we have to consider, and how we talk about the partnership. Finding a focus for the partnership, that's the goals. We hold that across various sessions. And in this session, I think it's important to, if I'm following the question right, and I hope I'm offering something useful, we often talk about the coaching container and what it is that we want to create within that space of time. One thing that can be challenging is that we think that in this session, we have to cover every single competency. We have to cover every single checkbox. We need to go from agreement to coaching to conclusion to action. I think we try to honor what the client brings to that container that day, but we also have to remember that that session is connected to other sessions. It's in a continuum of conversations. And so we are attentive to what's showing up in that particular container at that particular time. And we have to remember that it is part of a longer conversation. So it's a both and I hope I'm perhaps offering something helpful there with regard to what you were thinking. And if I'm missing the mark on what you were hoping, please add in the chat.
Yeah.
And I can try
to... when it comes to this webinar, there's a limitation of time. It's like,
yes.
It's a very short time. So you really cannot exhibit everything. So there's a question from Yasmin there. At some point, I wasn't sure where the agreement began or ended, or if it ended. It all flowed really naturally, but where do you think the distinction was, Beth?
Yeah. Where is that? Is that question in the chat?
Yes, it's in the chat.
Okay.
It's a little up. I'm not sure if you can look at it. Do you want me to repeat it?
Yes. Oh, wait, here we go. Wondering if the agreement was done.
That's another one. So
okay.
Basically, two or three people have asked us as to what exactly were we looking at in the session or as an agreement. What was the agreement done?
Yeah. And that's a great question. And that's where, we didn't necessarily, and this is where I said I wouldn't do it perfectly. We knew we were talking about this PhD application and the timing and whether, how he was going to proceed with it. And we did sort of ease into the coaching without necessarily saying by the end, I didn't explicitly say by the end of our conversation, what do you want? But notice that Opal also said, I want clarity on how I should proceed. Where we went was again, like person, not problem, with like, how do you feel about doing this? And that's what got us to the who wants this piece. And so this is an example of, it was a little squishy. It was very real, right? And it doesn't always follow a like clear, boom, boom, here's where we are in the session. And it often sort of melts into the coaching. And I think I could have slowed down and backed up and just said, so just so we're clear about what you would like to come away with, how would you bottom line that? That's something I could have asked. So that's a learning, right?
And again, it is like basically dancing with the coachee, right? So
yep.
it has to come naturally and it has to flow that way. And Opal himself was so very reflective and, so very
yes.
contemplating kind of a client. So it's like, you just went in the flow kind. So there's another, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say really quickly. And if we have had these conversations with our client to let them know how to prepare, they will start answering those questions themselves without us asking. So they will say, here's what I want to focus on, and here's what I want to come away with. And we might not ask that explicit question, but they will anticipate. And in some ways that's ideal because they've already given it some thought and we can just continue to seek clarity.
There's another question here, Beth. Should a coaching session end with solution to the problem faced by client? What is the success criteria of a successful coaching session?
Yeah. Well, so I think of the end of a coaching session as having multiple possibilities. We are often very action oriented, like outcome oriented, and saying we need the solution or the result. And that is one place that we can end. I think of so that's action. And I have 4 A's that I think about that can be a successful outcome from a session. Some sort of action, that the client is committing to take, an awareness that they have about something. And I would offer that, that I think that was the primary outcome from Upal's time, from our conversation, is an awareness that of what the questions are that he wants to focus on that are going to help him make this decision. So awareness, alignment of some kind. So I would argue that the who wants this is part of getting alignment with what is important to him as opposed to someone else. What is important to his values of peace, passion, enjoyment, purpose. So an awareness of what would be in alignment. And then also acceptance. Sometimes the tension or the challenge is that a client is resisting something. They want to be somewhere where they are not. And so having an outcome of saying, okay, I accept something about this. I accept this reality. And now I have this awareness, and here's what I want to do with it. So that's a general response to that to not get too hung up on, we have to end the session with a nice, neat bow tied and all the answers solved. Because remember what I said before about how a session is part of a continuum, and it's an ongoing conversation. And part of the success metric is, what does the client determine is successful? And then how do you co-create that success together? And are you preparing them for the idea that not every session is going to result in, okay, I'm going to do A, B, C, and D and be ready and done, right? So that's a conversation that you have so that there's that understanding.
Aishwarya, can I make a small suggestion? Yeah. No, a small thing now. What I really felt with regard to this session, Beth, now, you didn't know me at all. You don't know my background, nothing. Basically, we just started the conversation, and then you were basically taking me through the conversation. Now, if you really, focus on the total outcome of the conversation, maybe sometimes I would have ended up with, on the, where I ended up with the previous conversations. But within this particular time period, I had certain insights to really work out and come up with a decision later. So actually that is my outcome. I think I'm so happy about that outcome. I didn't want to have a, concrete decision here. Basically, I got the real something out of this particular conversation, right? So I think I definitely have that value.
Yeah, I think, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it's not that, just now I decide on something. I don't want that. So that cannot be done, but I had certain great insights, that's the value for me.
Yeah. Yes. We thank you for offering that. That is a wonderful reflection. And to remember, the aha moments, the realizations, the decisions, they don't always or often happen in a coaching session. The coaching is what sort of paves the way for that work to be done outside of the session and in between the sessions. And if we are focused on the client has to have an aha moment, or they have to have the answer, we're focusing on the wrong thing.
Absolutely. Thank you, Opal, for sharing that. And thanks a ton, Beth. So we have a lot of comments coming up about the session and how they loved it and how they loved the flow. I don't see any particular question anymore which needs to be answered. So with that, I will take this moment to thank both of you, Opal and Beth, for doing this for us. We really, really enjoyed this session. And thank you for doing it. And before we close, I have put in the link for the forms to get the CCUs in the chat box. So kindly copy this link and submit the form. This webinar is eligible for getting the core competency CCUs. So please fill in the form and submit. Copy the link there. I'm posting it again. Thank you once again, Beth and Opal.
Thanks, Beth.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
Asharya. I thank CTT for getting me into this program. Thank you. Keep in touch, Beth.
Yeah,
Yes.
so thank you. Have a great day. Wonderful day, everybody. Thank you so much, Beth. Yep.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Best wishes, everyone.
Bye. Bye, everybody.